Welcome to another episode of the Thunderstock Show, a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Today's guest, going with the theme of our EOS implementer season, is Carson Clark. Carson is based out of the North Carolina region, which is an interesting take because he's not from there originally. He's an EOS implementer. He's had experience with Fortune 500 as well as starting, running a 75-person company. So, Carson, we graduated high school the same time. You've done a lot in your career. What did you have in mind before you entered the corporate world? And how did you choose BYU as the place to go?
Well, first, thanks for having me on. I'm glad to join you, Ross. I've seen some of what you've done before, so happy to join. And, I don't know that I had a grand plan. Funny enough, so I grew up in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and moved to Utah in high school. And it was only about 30 minutes from BYU. And I thought that's kind of where the nerdy kids went to college. And so my freshman year, I actually decided not to go there because I didn't want to hang out with the nerds. And I went to Utah State. I had a full ride leadership scholarship there. And I actually really wanted to do broadcast journalism. That was my major. In my high school, we had this teacher who went all in and we would run a daily news broadcast. And so I was always the main anchor or sports or sometimes even running all the computers behind it. And so I was all set on being the next Stuart Scott on ESPN. And that's kind of what I had in mind when I was 18.
Were you big into sports yourself, or you would just love the production part of it?
Oh no, I'm big into sports. I played basketball, football, some golf, soccer. I
Oh,
have,
all of them.
yeah, exactly. So I love sports.
Huh. So then what made you take the leap to go from Utah State to BYU? You said, you know what? I'm going to join the nerds, so to speak.
Gonna join the nerds. I went to Zimbabwe on a service mission, and while I was out there, just kind of felt like I think it's a good thing to change. It was definitely a higher ranked school in terms of the business school, and I knew I wanted to switch more into the business realm. So uh, I went for a better business school, I guess.
Hmm.
I can see the Aggies with their pitchforks now. If anyone listens to this from Utah State.
Hey, you got to do what's right for you in your career. So fast forward, did you continue to do that major or did you switch more to like business?
Well, I went to BYU and I actually was sure I was going to go into accounting because they had the number three accounting program in the country. And I was like, awesome, I'm going to do that. And I got an accounting internship. And a day in, I was like, man, accounting is super boring. So I switched to supply chain. So I knew I wanted to go business, went accounting, then switched to supply chain is what I got my business major at.
So right out of college, you joined a company that was, not small by any stretch, over 20 billion. Um, what was it like to have that as your first step? I think a lot of people, uh, it's a rare first step for many. So what was it like?
Well, I guess coming out of the business school, I felt like it was really pushed. Like you should go to a Fortune 500 company. I felt like, oh, that's the good thing to do.
Mm.
And I had a professor who I loved, Scott Webb, little shout out to him. And he was like, the best job in the country you could get is Whirlpool's supply chain development program. And so I was like, I'm going to go do that. And so went there. It was a 3.5 year leadership development program, and they threw you into totally different experiences. Like my first year and a half, I was doing data analytics. My second job, a year and a half in, I was running a manufacturing team of 100 people. Average age is like 55. I'm 25. And um, it was that was an amazing experience for me. And then The third thing I did as part of that program was a big software launch. We had this software that we used with all of our suppliers who we spent $7 billion a year with this supply base. And we basically told them, hey, we've been doing it this way for a long time. You now have to switch to this software. And so I was kind of the guy in the procurement world leading that with the suppliers. So what I loved about it is I'm admittedly a generalist. And I loved that it just gave me such different insights into business. I love learning about businesses, how they work, how they make money, where their key points are. And so that was a ton of fun. Loved the people. And I had a goal coming out of that program. I was like, I'm going to be the first person to come out of this program and be promoted to manager right out of this program. And then I did it, and I was looking around and I was like, this is not as cool as I thought it was going to be. I sort of flunked out of the Fortune 500 world after I realized it wasn't my cup of tea, so to speak.
That's interesting because now you help to facilitate management programs. In a way, EOS is in my opinion the gold standard for small businesses to have an operating system, have a management program. So maybe that was just a matter of taste. Like, hey, this big business, maybe there was a lot of red tape or bureaucracy. I don't know, but management might be the goal, but not necessarily the environment part of it.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I was at one point in time, I really thought that I'm like, I'm going to work and become the CEO of Whirlpool. That was my goal. And over time, I realized, it would be a lot of pain and suffering to get there because there's just so many layers of bureaucracy. So you can do all of this work for months on things. And then someone says one sentence and project canceled or something happens. So it just felt kind of pointless. It felt like there
Mm.
were 100,000 employees and some things need to happen, but then lots of people are working on. It's like you're constantly doing and undoing things for each other. It felt like a pointless exercise to me.
And as someone that I can already tell, Carson, that would be motivated by purpose with your Zimbabwe mission trip and your big hairy audacious goals even from an early age. That sounds like the antithesis of where you wanted to be. So seems like the logic around making your next transition was pretty straightforward and you came to terms with it quickly. What was your next step after you left that? You then go on to running a smaller company, or what was that?
After that, I was like, I'm not going to do anything rash. I'm just going to see if maybe I like this world, but I just need to change companies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of went and did the same thing I was doing at a company that was not as large. It was like $100 million company. And I found that I still didn't like it. And there I wasn't a culture fit. So we talk a lot about right person in the right seat. In
Sure.
that business, I was in the right seat, but I realized pretty quickly, like, wow, this is not my kind of people. And so from there, then all of a sudden I hit this road of, all right, uh, I've been down the big company world. I really don't want to do this. And I'll say the truth, which is I'm a man of, faith is important to me. And I felt like some, some urges and pushes to randomly look into the dental world. And I
Hmm.
really wanted to, very random. I wouldn't have come up with it myself. And I started I called like 10 dentists and I just asked them, what problems do you have? And I was taking notes of those. And then I just wanted to get in and help these dentists. And so I made a one pager and I was like, hey, I solve all these problems. Like, boom, here you go. Um, I cherry picked the ones I knew that I could solve with my experience. And so I just went around talking to dentists, telling them I could solve those problems. And I had like uh, three dental groups offer me a job. And ultimately, I took the lowest paying one because I loved the culture of the team that they had. And that's kind of where I got introduced to more of the small business and EOS. I
Mm.
got in there we're running this business. I'm the COO, and things weren't moving that well. Like our EBITDA was declining. We had all these different locations that looked like they were totally different businesses. They ran totally different from each other. And there were a lot of fractured relationships between the owners of the company, leaders of the company. It was a little bit messy. And a friend of mine was like, "You should read Traction." So the age old story, read it, loved it. It just, I had a Six Sigma black belt from before and all of this lean training. And I was like, oh, this is like, it's like practical operations as
Mm.
opposed to, making everything way too complex. EOS just made everything simple and easy. And I just connected with that. So that's kind of where it came in. I was a customer of it. We ran the business on it.
So
We
did you have an implementer?
So we tried our own for a little bit, and I was like,
Mm.
I'm really good at this kind of stuff. And then we brought in an implementer, and I was like, ooh, I can see this is different. And um, yeah, totally loved it. And so I fell in love with EOS. We increased our EBITDA 55% on it. We we partnered with a private equity firm. I worked for them for a while. All great people. And eventually I just said, like, I'm all in on this stuff. I'm an entrepreneur, not an employee. I'm just going to, put up my own shingle and help other businesses.
So then you decided at some point in that journey with, after the merger with PE that, you know what, I'm just going to take the leap of faith and do this. And what year, how long have you been doing implementation?
So that was a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, there's so much to unpack. One thing that I found interesting is that, like, I was faced at a similar probably juncture where people were telling me, go back to school, get your MBA. The firm I was with, they were big into like investing in education, and that was like something that we were like in talks of. And then around the time that firm hired an implementer, and I had been promoted to leadership, and I was always in. So I was in like individual producer roles before and did well and hit numbers, and then I got into sales and did well and led sales, whatever. Um, And then there was an opening that was like, hey, you want to get into leadership? It's kind of similar to you. I would say average age of the firm, 45. Um, I was 27, you know, and it was my first time doing leadership, and it was the best timing for an implementer. And as soon as we had our first session day, like, I'm not getting my MBA. Like, this is nothing against MBA, but I was like, this is the one for me. It's simple. I love the environment, the feel, and it really felt like it matched well for entrepreneurial, small to mid-sized business. And I feel like MBA, in my mind, the next step after that would be to disengage from the entrepreneurial route and maybe go to like a bigger mid-size, to go up in size of company
Yep.
versus going deep with more entrepreneurial businesses. What are some of the differences between what you learned through MBA and what you learned through EOS?
It's interesting, actually. I had a good experience in that I did the executive program at UNC, go Heels, baby. So I was the COO while I was going through this program. And so, for example, in one of my classes, we're learning about how companies are valued at the
Mhm.
time that we're talking with this private equity firm.
Oh,
You
what a
know,
great timing, huh?
and so we're going through these exercises. You're building models and doing it yourself, and that was just really powerful. Was I would learn something and I would do something. So
Mm.
you know you're having an HR class about how you would fire someone or go through this hard conversation. And then literally like 2 days later, I'm having to do that. So I loved it. And UNC, I did, it's very odd. But during my MBA, I found out I was an entrepreneur, and I actually emphasized in entrepreneurship, took all of the entrepreneurship classes, and kind of realized, you know, this is totally who I am. So I'm not like MBA for everyone. And I totally agree that many people, it's like, if you put that 100 grand or whatever it is towards entrepreneurship, you're going to get a lot more out of that. And for whatever reason, for me, it was a good part of the journey for me. It helped me. And selfishly, the Carolina alumni is pretty awesome in the Raleigh area, and so that's fun to be a part of.
Hey, some of the greatest to ever do it came from UNC, one being Michael Jordan, right?
Well,
So
amen to that. Dude, that's the guy right there. 23.
yeah, number 23, but also BYU, some of the, I think, in my opinion, right, selfishly, some of the greatest, at least in the space of digital marketing came from there. I know we talked a little bit offline. So it seems like, what's that?
Who do you like that's come out of BYU?
Well, Russell Brunson, for example, one of the people that when I was starting out in the digital marketing world and just reading as many books, listening to podcasts as possible, he was one of, what's his moniker, like the great American storyteller of the generation. So he could talk about complicated technical things with marketing, but he could tell stories like no other. And yeah, I mean, he started all that while he was in the dorms at BYU. I think he was married before he graduated, and he was just like, you know what? I'm going to make this work. And he did. I think one of the questions I have or thoughts about that is, what is it? You mentioned this, okay? We're going to hone in on culture, fit, and core values. But what are some of the key determinants? Because you've definitely picked some organizations that were like being on the right team. So, like, what do you look for when either it's like in a client that has like a great culture and core values that you would want to match with, or whether it was a college organization? Like, what are some of the characteristics that they have in common that you think this is a winning team?
Yeah. Well, part of it, so you're familiar maybe with the marketing strategy of VTO or of the
Yep.
VTO.
Absolutely.
You
Vision
know, we
Traction
talk
Organizer.
we talk about our three uniques. And so my three uniques are, number one is I've got this tenacious focus on client results. Like it's got to be really practical. And that's, I think, where my ops background comes in as it's really going into the nuts and bolts. But number two is I've got this approach of like I've got a calm and nurturing approach. And the combination of those two, I think people like, where it's like I'm crazy ambitious, but I'm not like so in your face about it or throw you up against the wall. And people like that. And then, the third is just that I've run a business on EOS. But the reason why I say that is because I think that combination of people who tend to gel with me, it's like they have this inner ambition where they they want to thrive and do their best. Sometimes they might be the loudest, but often they're not like the loudest person in a room trying to, take all the attention, right? So things they have in common though it is that consistent desire, like just this desire to be their best and a humility and willingness to acknowledge that they need to change
Mm.
in order to be their best. Those are some of the things that stick out to me.
So we talked earlier about your fascination with sports. Hopefully, you're like me and you really enjoy watching college sports. And one example of what those three uniques of what I can definitely pinpoint to a college sports organization is Penn State's wrestling team. So Penn State's wrestling team, me being from Pennsylvania, you can't see my ears on purpose. They're
Cauliflower
pretty.
ears.
Oh yeah, pretty bad. I'll show 'em.
Love it.
So you can tell that was a big part of my upbringing, but so was a lot of my friends and the teams that I was part of, and several of my teammates went to Penn State to wrestle. And I distinctly remember a good friend of mine when he joined Penn State. It was the last year of the former coach and the first year of Cale Sanderson. And when Cale Sanderson joined, like my friend, I could see the difference in his character within months of having the new coach. And for those of you that are listening, you know, obviously you would have to know the background, but I'll summarize it quickly. It's that Cale Sanderson was arguably the best wrestler in, like, as a competitor in the history. He was undefeated 159-0 on the cover of the Wheaties box and Olympic gold medalist, you name it. Like he's done it as a competitor, but I think he's better as a coach. And in the last, what is it? It's 2025, 2025, call it 10 or so years, 11, 12 years. He's set and broken his own record for greatest team in every category, and they've just continually won. But his approach was interesting. What my friend came back was, and this might be somewhat a correlation between the LDS and the high faith base approaches to life, was that we want you to be the best that you can be. Obviously, like do the right inputs. Don't worry so much about the results because if you do the right things and you're a good person, the results will come. But like they have fun. So they're incredibly ambitious, but it's like nurturing like a big family, very team spirit bonding. They have fun and they celebrate all of the things, right? Like as long as you're a culture fit and you're doing your absolute best, as long as you get it, want to have capacity, it's okay to make mistakes. The result is the process. Anyway, I wanted to share that sports analogy with you because it sounds like there's a commonality. And do you think that there is this component between the faith that you have and the way that you like live your life?
Well, you just highlighted on so many things I want to throw back at you here. But to answer your question immediately, I mean, I think, yeah, it reminds me of the EOS tool, the getting what you want tool, what you're saying, right? Which is you have this thing you want here. Maybe it's revenue, maybe it's profit, maybe it's a promotion, maybe it's a wife, whatever it is, right? And, and it's like, how do you break it back multiple steps? What drives that, what drives that, what drives that, to now what's this thing I have control over, and now I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to increase the frequency and I'm going to increase the quality, and that's naturally going to get the result I want, as opposed to sitting there obsessing about, I want more revenue, I want more profit, I want a promotion, whatever it is. Like when you focus on those things you can control and get better and better, life just gets better. So I do think, yeah, I think continual improvement and progression is part of our faith background and upbringing. I think so.
Sanctification.
Yeah, I think so. So I have to take a pause here as well. You'll appreciate this. So guess who went to my high school and is a great wrestler?
I would have to say Gable Stevenson.
Cale Sanders.
No way.
So Kale went to my high school, and you have to know here, there's this whole tree now. So
No.
in my high school, there is a shrine of Kale Sanderson, and it says 159-0 on
No.
this thing. And Kale's dad was the wrestling coach at my high school. And so my junior year, we've got 7 All-Americans who went on to like win in the national duels in Las Vegas. And I mean, we had a wrestling, I mean,
And you broadcasted. So you're familiar, you're in it.
oh yeah, totally. I played basketball. I was the basketball team captain, and it's probably the only school in the country where more people went to wrestling duels than basketball games.
My school probably was up there, but you seem like you're tall. If I had to guess, you'd be well over 6 foot.
I'm 6'2".
Okay, so 6'2". Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man.
So yeah, the Sandersons, the culture they have though, like I remember we would be doing basketball practice, and we'd be like winded from killers. We'd all have to shoot free throw, and so everyone on the team is there. And if anyone misses, you've got to do all the down and backs. Anytime anyone misses, we get done with that, we'd be like really tired. And then the wrestling kids would come down, door opens, the heat is just cranked, you know, and it's probably like 110 degrees up there, and they're all coming out just drenched, trying to make weight, it's a different breed. And so I appreciate, and there's some guys from my school who went to Penn State, who went to Michigan and wrestled there in college. We could probably nerd out for a while on all of that, but I'm so impressed by the wrestling community and the level of discipline and hard work and grit and consistency that's needed in that is amazing.
I that blows my mind. I want to double click on that. One, that's a really cool story. I really appreciate sharing. But two, it seems like even from high school, you had great examples of what good looks like, right? Of like what not only good as far as success, but good as far as character.
Yeah, I mean, I had that in my own house, which I
Yeah.
was lucky. Like my parents I had lots of good in the community, but my dad, amazing. I would consider him my best friend now outside of my wife, a really talented uh, businessman and entrepreneur, but a much better dad than any of that. And my mom, a total angel, really talented, an artist, really good at building a family, community, and culture. So I was lucky in my upbringing, I would say, the house I was born into and in the communities in which we lived.
So, man, you touched on something that I think we can tie into EOS, and it's like the reverence you have for your father is admirable, and like you said, you're blessed to have that relationship. But one thing that stood out to me was, he's a great businessman and highly successful. But I think even more important, you said he was a better dad. And I think that with business owners, sometimes there's a common theme where they're really focused on the result, right? With the growth and the revenue, that they might be great at being a boss to get the result, but sometimes their leadership might be lacking. Or in EOS terms, the is strong, the management, but the L is a little lowercase, and then they might be frustrated or flustered as to where's the A. And what I've found to be true for the last 8 years that I've been introduced to EOS or so is that you can't have accountability without both leadership and management. So, how do you go about helping businesses to solve for accountability given the EOS framework? And how do you feel about that example of like, your father as a frame of like great at seems like awesome at both?
Yeah. Well, I'll say first, I'll highlight on the personal side. So, my father was an unbelievable leader, and he is a visionary. Like he is a visionary to the T, and a really good one, honestly. Um, he is like size 100 font on the L. Like he is unbelievable there. In management, he wouldn't be embarrassed of me saying this. He's good in management. Like
Sure.
he's unbelievable in leadership. He's good in management, which is probably how it should be in a visionary integrator type of setup, right?
Right, right person, right seat for that.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe what does this look like and what does it not look like? So I'll share with you a story on this really quick.
Please do.
So, during the focus day, the first day of EOS meeting, we put together an accountability chart, right? And we design the structure that everyone goes into, and we do an exercise which is can be hard for people, which is GWC, with real-time performance review. All right, we have this ops seat. We're going to put Joey in it. Does Joey get it? Does he want to have the capacity? And you make everyone answer like yes, yes, no, yes, yes, yes. They have to share that feedback. And there was a gentleman on a team. This is gonna be a roundabout story, Ross. Here I am.
I'm buckled in.
All right. So, um, he was having a lot of trouble with accountability. And I knew that going in because he had told me that before we went to the focus day. And in the focus day, we got to everyone, and I assumed, like, all right, we're going to start sharing some real feedback with each other here. And he was just saying, like, yes, yes, yes to everyone. Like, everyone's great. And the next day he called me and he said, hey, I fired everyone on my leadership team. And I was like, you what? And he was like, yeah, they didn't GWC it at all. And long story short is he's bringing in other people. Accountability still not there. He cleaned house, brought in new people, and still never had accountability because he didn't have leadership or management skills. And on the flip side of that, that's like a horror story of a bad story, right?
That's a challenge for you, Carson, right?
Right.
As the implementer, like how do you navigate that scenario?
In that scenario, we don't make decisions for the company, but this was a hard one for sure, where I'm like, hey, are you sure this was a good idea? Like, do you have a plan? Like, what's your plan for filling each of these seats, like, now? Because now they're all gone. How is all of this going to happen? And, so he did end up going back to one and kind of working out a deal with them so that the business didn't like die the day after. But yeah, it was a challenge. It was definitely a big challenge. It's not a happy ending for them as well. So
But it's tough when this is so important. I've talked to a firm, and not a client of mine, but I'm familiar with them, that is two brothers started a company 15-ish years ago. And one brother is the visionary. The other brother is a project manager. So he's like in ops. I don't even know if he's the COO. And they're both founders. And I didn't talk to the other. I said, "Oh, that's unique." He goes, "Yep. He loves putting his hands on the work. He loves overseeing the product. He wakes up every day and loves his life and loves his job. And we need someone in that seat. And he wants to be in that seat. He doesn't want to be in the integrator seat. The working behind a desk and talking to people all day feels like a waste of time to him." And the reason I share that story is because so often do leaders or founders, I will say founders or owners of a company, feel like they have to be a seat, and it may or may not be within their DNA, right? So they're trying to force a GWC. And I love the self-awareness of that.
yeah, well, so positive stories on that is that, I've got probably three clients where there's co-founders, and initially they're like, one's visionary, one's integrator. And we always talk about, like, it doesn't have to be that way. There's the owner's box above the accountability chart where the owners live. And then as an employee in the business, like, what are you best designed to do? I've got three companies where they've switched that person out of the integrator seat, put someone else on the leadership team in that seat who really GWCs it, and then they go do, marketing or sales or operations. And it's hard for them initially, but pretty quickly all of them are like, yeah, this is a great decision. Company's doing way better. um, and the person who quote unquote gave up that seat is a lot happier because they're doing the work they're best at. They're not forcing themselves to do something they're just not equipped to do.
Well, it reminds me of part of the story you told earlier, where it was like, for no other reason than getting signs and signals and having a calling to go and make a one pager and talk to several dentist practices. You still could have done the seat you were in, right? But you felt compelled to do something else. And I think there's beauty in saying no to an opportunity, knowing on the other side that a better opportunity, more suited for you, will be there. And I think, and I don't know this, but my hypothesis is that a lot of business owners have negative emotions because they don't believe that to be true. They feel like they're stuck, or they feel like they must do XYZ. And they don't necessarily know that there's an alternative way, that if they would let go, it's easy for the delegate and elevate tool, right? Letting go of the vine. Like, don't worry, the sky won't fall all at once necessarily.
Yeah, it kind of comes back to it, you're totally right. And to me, it comes back to being really honest with the question, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the what you want is people are like, I've got a client who is like, I want to just blow the doors off of this thing initially. And then as they've gotten further in the journey, they're like, I want to run a really well run business and be home for dinner every night. And now I
Mm-hmm.
do that. I work way less. It's really good. And I'm happy with that. So I think really, really being connected to what you want and being honest with that. And some people, it's what do you want in the future of your business as well? Do you want to exit? Do you not want to exit? Do you want to
Right.
pass it down to another generation? Do you want the employees of your business to buy it? Um, and a lot of people have it like their heads are so wrapped around one way of doing things. And as they get into it, and if they're really honest with themselves and what they want, there's actually paths to get there a lot faster than what they have in their mind.
Man, it's such a complicated topic, but the way you just unpacked it makes it seem like pretty simple. It just starts with asking the right questions. The right questions don't have to be prefaced with Monte Carlo simulations and sensitivity analysis and all these like things that the SACS analysts can do for becoming. It could be from an implementer saying, "What do you want? I'm going to grab you by the shoulders, and it's either going to be I'm going to shake you or hug you until I get the answer that is true." Because there's no wrong answer. It is the one that is true for you. Is what do you want?
I think it's and this is kudos also. Don Tinney is big in this question. Don Tinney was the initial integrator of EOS worldwide. He was Gino's
Mm-hmm.
integrator. And I heard him ask this question in a way I'd never heard it before. And it made me realize how important that is as a part of the journey and your own journey, like asking yourself, okay, I'm Ross. What do I want? I have to do this as well for myself. I mean, to also highlight this, my wife and I, so we're nerds. We run our business on EOS, or our family, I should say, on EOS. We have a level 10 meeting every Monday night after the kids are asleep. We do our level 10 meeting. But recently we were reviewing our VTO and we realized like some of this isn't what we want anymore.
It's changed.
It's changed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we had to make some revisions and tweaks.
Yeah. If you're asking what do I want, I love that question. Right. And if I may answer, I want to ask you the same
I
one.
didn't want to put you on the spot. It's your
No,
show. You're the
please
guy who gets
do.
to put everyone else. So what do you want?
The big North Star for me, similar to you, where you had a positive role model growing up and loved my father dearly, but my grandfather, it would be easily the person who I want to model like a lot of my character traits and, try to emulate the success and more so the impact that he was able to have on being a family person, similar to what you described with your father. And what I want is to be a better, this is funny in 2025, it may still be like a controversial term, but I want to be like a better patriarch of the Stockdale family, right? So the person who leads the family, who takes care of the family, that makes sure the family is on the right track. Whatever you want to use the word, people are like, oh, down with the patriarchy. I think there's great value in having a strong father figure. And I want to be able to have that same impact my grandfather had on me and the rest of my family for my current family and future generations. And then, okay, then you ask, how do you do that? Well, when he was around the same age as myself, he had 500 employees and he was had his MBA from Chicago and he was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, all these cool things. I'm not going to do those things, but then, it's like, okay, so it's okay to have humble beginnings and have ambitious things, but he always made it home for dinner. And, I remember him going to my sporting events and he had a commercial real estate broker license until he was 93 years old and he's 95. He's 95 and he's like, maybe I should get it back. He goes, well, second thought, most of my contacts are dead, you know? So those are some of the things that I think about when what I want is like, who do I want to be more so than what thing do I want out of it? And I want to be a Stockdale that I think the other generations could remember and be proud of like he was. But more specifically, in terms of business goal, like the business BHAG, at least for myself, is simple is to help 100 entrepreneurs or small business owners to achieve financial freedom. And I think if I were to help enough people, I could achieve that goal. I can count on a hand how many have really helped to get there. And it's been guaranteed two, potentially three so far. And I've had several clients. We're still working towards that. But it's the idea that uh, you can make good people financially free. And that could mean something to somebody else. And I think that's my purpose, my vision, my mission is really to do that. And that could look like doing the service I do as a marketing fractional CMO. That could look like maybe somebody hears something from a podcast and they go and take action and change their life. I don't know, but that's what I want. Now my question is right back at you. What do you want? What does your VTO look like? I know your family runs on it.
Yeah. Well, I also am going to pause. This is like an implementer tactic, right? I'm going to pause. I want to put the focus back on you for a second. Back of the mind is like, what do I want? What do I want? No, but just you're helping 100, you know, people get financial freedom. It reminds me of the Zig Ziglar, right? If you help enough people to get what they want, then you're going to, you're going to get what you want. I'm paraphrasing that,
Yep. Love
but
that.
it's powerful when it's not about you. It's like when the focus is all about them, we both serve clients, right?
Hmm.
And when the focus is all on them and not on your cash flow, it's amazing how the cash flow just comes. It's again, it's the getting what you want tool we talked about, right? If all we focused on was the thing, only the outcome we wanted, it'd be a lot harder to happen than focusing on the things that we can control that drive it. And I love that you're doing such good work for other people gives you that autonomy to go home at night, have dinner, and have clarity of mind because you're not thinking, oh, you're not worried about everything. You can be present as you do that.
It is an everyday. So one of the things I love about EOS and I love about the goal setting and the components of rocks and scorecards though is that you have a 10-year target BHAG, and then you have a 3-year goal, and then you have a 1-year goal, and then you have a quarterly rocks and scorecard, and then you have, your weekly L10, right? But all of those things are just accumulation of the day, of every day. And I think one of the metrics that I really want to start to track if I'm going to be running my family on EOS is yes, no, did we leave it all out there today? And that could mean like, was I present when I was supposed to be present with the family? Or was I checking email? That could mean, did I make all of my commitments that I was said yes to? Okay. Or did I, leave some left in the tank? And I think life is just accumulation of living every day to your best of your ability. And to your point, that North Star, that BHAG might change. You might hit it 3 in 3 years versus 10. Great. Doesn't mean that you're done setting goals. I think the harshest truth that people that at least I've worked with is they've set their goals too low. And then once they've attained it, they've felt underwhelmed. And it's like, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. The here's something that stuck out to me. I'm forgetting the guy's name. He's the CEO of Gab, which is a company that makes like safe phones for kids, so prevents a lot of the nonsense that kids get into on their phones. He said that every week he asks each of his kids and his wife, like, what's important to you this week? Like, what's so important to you? And so he always knows so he can be there for those things. And sometimes I think like being there for my family when I get home means I have to like play with my 4-year-old for 4 hours straight. But I realize if we go play soccer and wrestle and maybe play some Peter Pan and Captain Hook, like, and if all of that happens in 20 minutes, he's so happy the rest of the night. But it's just like, um, yeah, getting these kids what they need. I'm just resonant. We're in similar life scenarios here, but the what you want. So on my VTO, I'll tell you the truth of it is I have a income dollar. I say make this much while family is my number one priority.
Okay, love that.
And and the number is $1 million a year. So it's make $1 million a year while family is the number one priority. For me, it's important because I know it's possible to do one of those and not the other. And I also know it's possible, like I feel like I have this potential to make that income, right? So I also don't just want to be like, well, I'm just a good dad and I don't need to worry about,
Right.
you know, making a good living. But I believe in self-actualization and in all of the areas of life. So I'm gonna put ands instead of ors on things.
Love that frame because why not? Right. It's part of your ambitious nature.
There you go. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. So what are I don't want to let you off the hook on the running life on EOS type thing, but obviously your kids are the right people in the right seat. You know, your wife, right people, right seat. But how do you, this is probably really tough for a lot of entrepreneurs, navigate if you're looking at your circle of peers, whether it's friends or mentors or whatever else, not necessarily focused on business, because for people like you and I, Carson, you know, it's an integrated life of business and living your life. There's, you know, there has to be room for both. It's not either or, it's and. It's like, how do you keep the close knit, whether it's friends, acquaintances, making sure that they're people analyzed and it's the right people in your circle?
Oh, that's really interesting. So, I'll admit that, a couple of things. One is that when you become a different person, it can be lonely in the same friend group, right?
Correct.
Is because you're like, you're just flying, chasing all these ambitions, and sometimes you have friends who are just really comfortable here, and maybe where they're at is a great place, but for them, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. But for me, I can't wake up and be like, I'm going to do the same thing every day for the next 30 days. I need a life of a little bit of adventure is one of the Clark family values on the VTO. So I've never people analyzed my friends in terms of, are they this way? But I
I
think I
haven't
naturally,
either,
my, but it's not
but now I'm
above me.
thinking
Yeah,
about it.
exactly. Now I'm
Now
going to
I'm thinking
go,
about
yeah.
it.
Uh, but I do say this has naturally happened a lot for me. And
Mm.
I've moved a lot physical. I lived in Minnesota, lived in Utah, lived in Michigan, Boston, Tennessee, North Carolina. And this is kind of like our, home where we're going to be for a long time. But in that moving around, I think I sort of lost touch with people and some of that naturally just happened. But I've always had good friends. Like, if you look at my groomsmen at our wedding, it was like, you're like all great dads. And you look at them now and you're like, they're all really successful. It's like doctors and entrepreneurs and software engineers, lots of a weird amount of doctors in that group, actually. So I feel lucky to have had that. Some people believe in like the energy waves, and I say that light attracts light,
Mm.
right? And so I think it's like a natural filtering system where your energy goes and who you want to spend time with and talk with, it kind of just becomes your friend group. So no, I haven't people analyzed my friends and taken them off the accountability chart,
But there's some
but
commonalities in the culture and the core value.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it has naturally happened who I spend time with and who I talk to. But also I'll say for as adults, you just spend less and less time talking with peers and friends and more just with your family, right? Working and family. So I spend a lot more time with clients than I do with friends.
Yeah, it's an added bonus when your client when you can. I found this aphorism to be true. It's easier to make a friend out of a business relationship than it is to make a business relationship out of a friend. And I've learned that lesson time and time again.
I love that. You're totally right. Like anytime I'm together, I actually had an event where I had clients together recently for March Madness.
Hmm.
And I was like, this is such a cool group of people. Like, and just seeing the way that they get along, I just realized like, wow, this is kind of like my community and brand. And you're right. When you've been through the trenches together, you become friends because you go through it and you help each other through some pretty wild stuff. So I know we're about there on time. Um, what what do you wish people knew about marketing that they don't understand?
Man, it's really similar to your discovery of EOS. So, in that, what I mean by that is that effective does not equal complex necessarily. Like EOS, once you've done however many sessions you've done, and you've read the book and you understand the tools, like they're meant to simplify your life. There's a philosophical phrase called Occam's razor, which is that the best answer is typically the one that accounts for all the facts. With the That's also the shortest, which to me is just simple as
Simple.
scales and fancy fails. So what I a common misconception with a lot of people in marketing is that they think they have to learn every new trend and trick and be everywhere all at once, and it has to be incredibly expensive and nebulous. And that a lot of one of the problems I solve for clients, it's just like fundamental, is, and I use the scorecard to help this, is like, do you know your marketing efficiency ratio? What I mean by that is, not necessarily your ROI, because that's a bit more granular and it's fine, it's similar. It's for every dollar that you put into marketing, how many do you get back? And track that first, and then get more granular as it goes. But don't not track that because you're trying to get custom UTM parameters on, these like funnel retargeting. I'm just using a bunch of acronyms. Marketing pros, sometimes one of the things that drives me nuts is that they'll just like talk over people's heads and then just be like, oh, I'm really smart and I'm going to use these fancy lingo. It's in my industry. But what I start with is really like, I say when we set a budget, it's first comes energy, then comes time, then comes budget, what comes money. And that's how I look at a budget. Because if I'm talking to a client that could be the same industry, different location, totally different founder, I can't say the same things apply. That would be like a drug dealer versus doctor, which I'm sure your friends would probably agree with, right? Diagnose the patient first and then do no harm. What I mean by that is, if there's someone that loves being on camera and they're a face, let's lean more towards that, right? And if someone hates it, but they love to write, okay, let's do more of the written thing. But it's figuring out what do they love to do and what's unique to their brand and identity. And that all comes back to answering your question of marketing can be simple and it can be unique to you and it can be effective all at once. And my goal is to help people to understand what is the right way to market your business enduringly, that it's not only successful where you get the outcome that you want, but it doesn't become a drag operationally. So it can be simple, it can be effective, and it can be unique to you.
Well, I appreciate it because it's practical. And I think I've seen a lot of marketing pitches, whether that was I was spending money in marketing and determining who to use or presenting with other marketers at things. And I think it's rare to find people who take such a practical approach to marketing.
Hmm.
So I'm going to give you your flowers on that because ultimately that's what you're not like, hey, the companies you're working with aren't like, I'm Nike and it's all about brand marketing. You're working with companies that they want marketing to bleed into sales.
Sure.
You know,
Yep.
it's more about sales marketing than it is about brand marketing. That's my
On
perspective.
average, yeah, on
Yeah.
average, yeah. And then there's some companies that I've been with for we're on our second year. We've hit our sales pipeline and lead quota, and they have got more work than they need to do. They need to hire people, and now we're working on a brand to attract talent, which I look at as like, great. What is your misconception that you'd like to clarify in terms of business leadership or EOS or really life in general? What do you wish people knew that they struggle with, that you're just like, there's a better way?
I don't think I can take on life in general. I'm not qualified for that one. I don't know. That's a bad answer on here, but I feel like
I think it's a great answer.
when I find, I guess if there's one thing I would say, the value of curiosity
Right.
is,
Because what I hear from saying I don't know is I can't preach from the pulpit that thou shalt do this, but I can say, let's take steps to figure it out. Right.
I mean, if you're a business owner that runs a business that does like 3 to 50 million in revenue, I'm like, oh my goodness, yeah, let's talk and EOS all day long. Um, I guess a misconception people sometimes have is, why would I need anyone's help to do that?
Mm.
And You know, this does not bother me at all when I hear this, and we have a really practical conversation. But my experience was when you're doing it yourself, which I've done both. When you're doing it in the room, you're spending all your time facilitating and you're not able to participate and focus on the end, like where you get to in the end. Or you're not just trying to drag everyone to your way and you're not actually taking in their input. So the value of a third party in really facilitating and taking different perspectives and letting you be a participant and not the person who has to run the meeting. I think that's an important thing to know of the value of working with the right implementer for you.
Where can people get in touch with you and get a hold of you to learn more, see what you're all about, and potentially engage with you as an implementer?
Yeah. So my email is carson.clark@eosworldwide.com. My phone number is 801-918-7185. My website is eosworldwide.com/Carson Clark. Those would be all places, but give me a call, give me an email. Would love to be in touch.
Well, thank you, Carson. It was a absolute pleasure to get to know you more and have this conversation. And for everyone listening, I hope that you take some lessons from this conversation. One being that you can get what you want out of life, not just with business, not just with money, but out of life. And that really starts with asking yourself a few simple questions: is what do you want? So I don't run ads of the show. I don't plan to, but if you found this conversation to be valuable, it would mean the world to me to share it with a friend. Until next time, thank you, Carson, and thank you everyone listening.
Adios.